Good morning and welcome to the May meeting of the Local Planning Agency Board for Pinellas County, Florida. Today's public hearing held by the Local Planning Agency, or LPA, is being held to review a land use plan amendment request and other items relative to the county's planning and growth management program. The LPA is an independent advisory board charged with reviewing and making recommendations to the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners on cases to be heard today. The Board of County Commissioners will make the final decision on each item at a separate public hearing currently scheduled to be held on June the 17th, 2025 at 9:30 a.m. The BCC meeting will be held at 333 Chestnut Street in the Palm Room. The procedure for today shall go as follows. First, staff will make a brief presentation not to exceed 20 minutes. The applicant will then make a brief presentation, again not to exceed 20 minutes. We'll then hear from proponents, who will each be given 3 minutes unless representing a group of 5 or more, in which case they will be given 10 minutes. Non-speakers must be present and waive their time. We'll then hear from opponents who likewise will receive 3 minutes each unless representing a group of 5 or more, in which case they will be given 10 minutes as well. Non-speakers must be present and waive their time to get the 10 minutes. Then the applicant will be given an opportunity to close, answer questions, or respond to any concerns raised by the opponents or proponents for a period of time not to exceed 5 minutes. Before your presentation, please give your name and address for the record. All testimony needs to be under oath, so if you've not been sworn in already and you plan to testify, please rise now and be sworn. And Madam Clerk, I think you got everyone. Okay. Also, please fill out the slip on the table and present it to the clerk before you speak. There will not be continuing rebuttal, so please try to present all information and concerns you have while you're at the podium. If you plan to provide letters, written comments, studies, or other documents in response to the LPA's findings and recommendations, those must be received by the zoning section 15 days prior to the Board of County Commissioners meeting in order to be included in the record that will be transmitted to the Board of County Commissioners. And with that, we will move into the agenda. Next item is approval of the minutes for April the 9th, 2025. Board members, do you have any questions or discussion on the minutes before we take a vote? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion on the minutes.
Move approval of the minutes as submitted.
Motion by Hamilton.
Second.
Second by Johnson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes unanimously. All right, that takes us to item 3A1, FLU 25-02. And staff may proceed when ready.
Scott Swearingen will be presenting this case for us.
Understood.
Good morning. Scott Swearingen. I'm a long-range planning manager for the county. It's a pleasure to be before you this morning. I will try to be very respectful of your time as I go through a presentation on this case. It is FLU 2502 is the case before you today. The subject property is approximately just over 4 acres in size. It's on the north side of Tampa Road in Palm Harbor area. It's at 2261 Tampa Road to be precise. This is a land use change. It's a change to the future land use map that is being applied for. The current land use designation is residential suburban, and it's a request to change to the institutional land use designation. The zoning on the property is limited institutional, and there is no change proposed to the zoning as a part of this. There's no companion zoning case to this. The existing use is a religious institution, specifically it's a church, and the proposed use is the same as existing. The property owner has expressed the intent to make improvements to the property to kind of build up, on the ground, sort of the church that's already existing there today. To note, Tampa Road is a scenic non-commercial corridor with a residential subclassification. I think a month ago we dealt with a case that also was on a scenic non-commercial corridor, if I recall, or maybe a couple months ago. Anyway, so that is a designation that is on our county-wide plan map. And with that designation comes with some additional restrictions on the type of land uses that you can permit on that corridor. And I'll unpack that in a little bit in just a moment. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But that's Tampa Road, and that's the designation on Tampa Road, a scenic non-commercial corridor. The subject property on your map is outlined in red. You can see that it's on the north side of Tampa Road, and it's also at the corner of Reverie Road. You can see that just to the right or to the east. You can make out Belcher Road on the left side of the map to the west. That what doesn't show up on the map, but to the east on the right side, you approach the US Highway 19, where the Tampa Road intersection or interchange is at that point. The map on your left is a current future land use map. You can see that the property is a residential suburban designation, as are much of the properties in that area. There are some areas of residential, I believe it's residential urban, slips my mind at the moment. My glasses are off, so, and this is very small. So residential low, to the east. You can start to make out in that purple, that is the residential office retail designation. That's kind of approaching the US Highway 19 corridor, which is primarily that land use designation. So you can see that start to come into play a little bit to the east. And you can see another property just to the north along Reverie Road that is the institutional land use designation as well. And then the map to the right just simply shows how that land use would change at that intersection of Tampa Road and Reverie. This is the zoning map. So limited institutional, the zoning classification on the property. And then around it's kind of a strong mix. You have rural, residential, R1, and then again you can start to see the US Highway 19 corridor coming into play, and that's Commercial Parkway, which is the primary zoning designation along US 19 just to the east. Some site photos. So this is looking at the photograph. This is kind of like from the south looking to the northeast to the subject property. Very few established structures on the property to this point since the church has been there. And then this is the property frontage, kind of looking southwest along Reverie Road. You can sort of make out Tampa Road in the distance there. So the subject property is on the right of your photo. And then this is Tampa Road looking to the west. The subject property pretty much ends on the right, the bottom right of your photo, and you can see sort of westward as you're approaching the Belcher Road intersection. 4-lane divided arterial. And then in the opposite direction, Tampa Road looking to the west. This is the intersection at Reverie right here. The subject property is just kind of behind you to the left, is at that intersection. And you can start to make out, I believe that is a daycare center, I believe, in the photo, in the kind of almost center to the left in the photo. And that's looking east on Tampa Road. So the current residential suburban land use designation primarily allows for residential and agricultural uses, but secondary uses that can be permitted are also like institutional uses, transportation utility, ancillary, kind of non-residential, and recreation open space uses. According in the comprehensive plan, it notes this designation as generally being appropriate, and I'll read it verbatim, in areas where use and development characteristics are suburban residential in nature, in areas serving as a transition between more rural and more urban residential areas, and areas that are within the 100-year floodplain. 2.5 residential units per acre are permitted in that land use designation, as is a 0.3 FAR, floor area ratio, for non-residential uses. Moving to the proposed institutional land use, as you'd expect, institutional uses are the primary uses, so like schools, medical, government, daycare, community assembly, which would include churches and religious institutions, and then secondary uses, residential and recreation open space. And according to the comprehensive plan, generally appropriate for this designation is where educational, health, public safety, civic, religious, and like institutional uses are required to serve the community, so where they provide a community benefit, locationally speaking, and to recognize the special needs of these uses relative to their relationship with surrounding uses and transportation access. 12.5 residential units per acre is what would be allowed under the institutional land use, and I'm going to talk about the zoning in just a moment. and a 0.65 floor area ratio for non-residential uses. Moving to the zoning, 5.5 years ago, the property was rezoned from residential agriculture to limited institutional. That was about 5.5 years ago. It was approved in 2019, and the approval was to establish the church that is there today. The applicant today is the same applicant coming back to look to try and make some improvements to have a little more land use potential to bring in buildings and parking and impervious surface and whatnot. And that zoning that's on the property today, the limited institutional zoning district, it generally permits the same kind of uses that you'd find in the land use that I just went over in the institutional type of uses. And to know that particular zoning district, it does not permit residential dwelling units. So as the property is zoned today, you actually could not build residential on that property. For better or for worse, that's just, I thought it was an important thing to note. You'd have to rezone the property to build residential. Let's talk a little bit about surrounding properties. So the majority of the properties in the area are single-family residential. And then there's kind of a smattering, if you will, for lack of a better word, of some institutional, limited kind of professional service and recreation uses nearby. A number up Reverie Road, and then a little bit as well along Tampa Road. And you can see kind of that the retail businesses and those types of establishments start to increase as you approach US Highway 19 to the east. It starts to kind of, the intensity starts to build up as you move in that direction. Okay, back to Tampa Road for a moment. It's a 4-lane arterial roadway. That's its classification. And again, it's also a scenic non-commercial corridor residential. And what that does in our countywide plan rules that we have, that all of our municipalities are governed by, that restricts, there's restrictions on office uses, professional service, office support, retail, commercial uses. In a nutshell, that type of scenic non-commercial corridor of this nature does not want to allow more intensive like retail, office, commercial type uses. Think of McMullen Booth Road, for example. When you drive down McMullen Booth, you see them at some of the intersections, these nodes of commercial and retail. But in between, it's a lot of institutional, religious establishments, or backing up to residential, that kind of thing. And that's kind of the same kind of a classification that's on Tampa Road. And you do see that kind of character along Tampa Road as well, but maybe just not as pronounced in this area. On Tampa Road, in that segment, it operates at a level of service C with a volume to capacity ratio of 0.5. So what that means, that volume to capacity, if you get a pitcher and it's only half full of water, you're at 0.5. So only the volume on Tampa Road is about half of what it can handle today. And so potential traffic impacts, as we've evaluated, would not change the level of service on Tampa Road. It would still operate within that level of C, volume to capacity. And I believe level of service D is the maximum that would be allowed before improvements would be required or other considerations would be required for Tampa Road. Reverie Road, the other roadway adjacent, that connects Tampa Road to Nebraska Road. It's pretty much equidistant between Belcher and US 19, so it's that quarter mile in between that makes that connection. And it's a mix of residential, institutional, a little bit of personal service, office support type uses, and recreational uses along Reverie. And I'll close on impacts with the subject property is outside of our coastal high hazard area as well as our coastal storm area. It is not within a floodplain, and it is outside the 500-year floodplain, which is a little bit redundant, but it's in a non-evacuation zone. So, in summary, the proposed change, staff in the Development Review Committee recommend approval for the proposed land use change from residential suburban to institutional, and we note that the existing community assembly that's on the property today has expressed a desire to make improvements to the property. A variety of institutional type uses exist in the neighborhood, as well as other more kind of easy less intensive non-residential type uses, let's call it. The property is within a quarter mile from the US Highway 19 interchange at Tampa Road, where the development becomes much more intensive. The property currently zoned LI limited institutional, so it's kind of in the zoning anyway, already kind of set up for, you know, the religious institution that is there today and any whatever may, you know, could occur in the late future. It's consistent, the use itself is consistent with the policies established for scenic non-commercial corridors for this segment of Tampa Road, so it's consistent in that regard. The zoning itself does not permit residential uses, from full disclosure, just to make note. Traffic impacts on Tampa Road appear to be insignificant. And I would also just note to say that this approval of this would require a countywide plan amendment as well. By Fort Pinellas, and it would go before the countywide plan authority before it would ultimately be approved. Again, staff recommends approval, and the Board of County Commissioners meeting is scheduled for 6 p.m. on June 17. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you might have.
Board members, do you have any questions for staff? All right, seeing none, thank you for your presentation, and we'll hear from the applicant.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian Unk, 625 Court Street, Clearwater, on behalf of the applicant. I'm here joined by Father Fame, if you have any questions for him about the existing use or the plan for the property.
Is it your intent to have the notepad shown on the overhead?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for the warning. I'll be very brief. If we could just put the locational map back up from the county's PowerPoint, that would be helpful.
Could you please pull the PowerPoint? Thank you.
Yeah.
There we go. That's perfect. There we go. That's great. Thank you, Scott. So as the staff said, as Scott said, this is an existing Coptic church. They've owned the property since 2019. In 2019, they had a rezoning approved for limited institutional. We have found out as part of our expansion, our phase 2 expansion that is currently going through building permitting, that there is an FAR limitation on the non-residential uses in the RS land use category of 0.3. Our plan, our complete plan, is 0.34 FAR. So the practical purpose for this land use amendment is because we're 4% off, we're 4% over the RS land use FAR for our complete project. As Scott said, the zoning category of LI does not allow any residential units, so there's no concern about this property ever being developed with residential units without having to come back to you and the county commission first for a rezoning. And I did want to point out there are a multitude of houses of faith and also other institutional uses in this area. Directly across the street on Rivery is the Bible Baptist Church. Directly to the north is the Countryside Christian Church. To the northwest is the Gulf Coast Fellowship Church, and then down across Tampa Road to the southwest is the Unity of Palm Harbor Church, and directly next to that church is Palm Harbor Middle School. So we believe it's consistent with the comprehensive plan elements that are being considered here and the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, and certainly consistent with the Land Development Code. And again, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Board members, do you have any questions for the applicant's representative?
I do, Madam Chair.
All right.
Good morning, and thank you very much for
Morning.
being here, Mr. Jones. The neighbors in the area around the church right now, the residential residents, have they expressed any concerns for or against this rezoning?
No, ma'am.
Sorry, not rezoning, land use?
No, we've received no concerns. The church has a good relationship with the community, and as I said, directly to the north, there is a little bit of single family, but that's a church. It's kind of hard to tell, but off of Riviera Road on the left-hand side, and there's actually a college up there, or technically it's considered a school. So the institutional uses, particularly in this block, are pretty heavy. And then again, directly across the street on Riviera is another church. So I know this map kind of makes it look like there's a bunch of single-family homes directly around this property, but a lot of the uses to the north are institutional and directly across the street as well. But no, we have had no objections or concerns raised at all with the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board members, any other questions for the applicant? All right, seeing none, thank you. We'll now hear from any members of the public who wish to speak in support of the application? And I'm not seeing anyone in the room other than the applicant. Do we have anyone online?
Good morning, Madam Chair. No, there's nobody attending online.
All right, and I'm not seeing anyone in the room who, anyone else in the room who's walked in. So as far as opponents, I'm going to say that we don't have any here. Has anyone popped in online?
Shockingly, no.
All right, board members, any final questions or remarks? Or any final questions for the applicant or staff? Sorry. Seeing none. Applicant, any final remarks? All right, and with that, I will entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to approve agenda item 1, or FLU-25-02.
All right, motion by Hamilton.
Second?
Second by Larry Johnson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes unanimously. All right. That concludes the zoning portion of our agenda. Staff, do you have any announcements before we adjourn?
No, we do have items, though, for next month's agenda, so we will be having a meeting.
Wonderful. We're looking forward to seeing you. All right. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Hamilton.
Second.
Second by Larry Johnson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. Have a good month, everyone.
Quick and painless.